Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and tonight we are doing things a little bit new, a little bit different. Here I am using Streamlabs for the first time, which is certainly an interesting experience. Let me real quick make sure everyone can actually see me while I am live right now. Oh, yes. Yes, everyone can see me. Everyone can see me. All right, cool. All right, cool. So now that we have that out of the way, just real quick, I'm going to go ahead, just get a little bit of shilling out of the way. We are going to be pushing for some subscribers over on YouTube and Twitch. Those of you who are joining us on Twitch, I am so glad that you are here with us tonight. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a lot of fun because now I'm streaming on 2 platforms, and hopefully in the not too distant future, it'll be 3. So for those of you who are on either platform, remember to like, share, and subscribe. I am so glad that I have that little button now that allows me to pop things like that up on the screen. And of course, down at the bottom scrolling, you can see my social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch. I will soon be doing actual, short form videos where I discuss single topics over on YouTube. And I'll also be cross-uploading those to Rumble. And I'm pushing for, at this point, the 25 subscribers that I need to live stream on Rumble without paying them. So that'll be something to look forward to in the next couple weeks. So that's enough of my nonsense. Let's talk about our guest tonight, who I am going to go ahead and bring on here. You guys should all be aware of who this guy is. He is pretty cool. Pop his social media up on here. He is one of the co-hosts of the Titter Pigs podcast. He is, of course, Mr. Orcusdorkus. Welcome to Rollin' Bones.
Oh, well, thank you. And I really appreciate that introduction because with such the fine luminaries you've had on the show, like Levi Combs and Jeff Talanian and John Hook and Seth Skorkowski, I pale in comparison to that. So, but yeah, thank you. It's a real boost to my my ego. But most importantly, I'm happy to be here regardless. So, thank you.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, as far as Seth Skorkowski goes, I mean, you have one up on me because you've seen him hammered and I haven't. So,
yes, it's something to behold. I mean, it's like visiting Atlantis for the first time. I mean, it's you all you hear is myth and stories, and then you see behind the scenes, and then it's like, wow, he is just as cool as he is on his show, and even cooler after a bit of a crack and rum. But we'll save those stories for his own behind the scenes Hoosier life. But yeah, it was good times.
I'm relieved to hear that he doesn't turn immediately into dweebles upon 3 drinks. So
no, but his friend that was there with him is Jorge. Is the inspiration for many of the different characters that he does. So it was also a joy to see the person behind the many different characters that he does too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, as great as it is to talk about things that'll get Seth to send us DMs and be like, dude, what the hell? Let's move on to the introductory questions that everyone gets asked when they come on Rollin' Bones. So, I mean, let's begin at the beginning here. Okay. Scott, how did you get into role-playing games?
Well, we'll go back to the past, so the clouds are going to come and cover everything, and it's going to part. and there'll be a little Scotty in second grade, and he sees a friend of his reading this green book. As he gets close to it, there's these captivating monsters and thing on the front, and the name of that book is Return to Brookmere, an endless quest book. I'm sure many people who have gray in their beard like I do may know that book well, and others, if you don't, definitely go check it out. But what it was is it's a choose your own adventure style game that was published by TSR, and it involved many different characters and aspects of Dungeons and Dragons. And after I borrowed it from him, he gave it to me during recess. And after the 5 days went by, and he said, "You still have that?" And I had no idea what you're talking about, and was forced to give it back to him. Come to find out that he and others knew about this wonderful game that was based upon called Dungeons and Dragons. A friend of mine's father, who was probably maybe your age or so, maybe a little bit older, had the classic basic box set, the blue box, and also the basic and expert box. And we dove into this. It was amazing. We couldn't make heads or tails of it, and we just improvised. And for several years, it was just kind of like what many people have done when they got involved with it when they were younger, was just took bits and pieces of it, kind of made our own game. And as we matured and were capable to understand some of these complex rules for our age, it did evolve into more passionate aspects of gaming, and then into advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and as we got older in high school, into second edition, and then from there. And that aside, I've always been a gamer outside of that my whole life. I've always been playing video games, computer games. The day that I got my brand new CGA card and could see the glorious black and purple colors for the first time, was something to behold. So not just with role playing games, but all gaming aspects. For generally speaking, my entire life. But yeah, that was my general introduction. Was not really D&D per se, but I always say it's the Endless Quest Return to Brookmere. And even though it's a choose your own adventure book, I always say it counts. God damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of that stuff, people can clown on the VHS game or the choose your own adventure books, or any of the different kind of weird ways that TSR merchandised D&D. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, you have to be introduced to it in some way. And for a lot of kids who were reading choose your own adventure books, those books were an access point to role-playing games.
Right. It allowed. I was an early reader, and so a lot of the books like that we had at our school library. Lloyd Alexander's The Black Cauldron, The Hobbit, and other things like that. We were reading, but this was like, oh wow, we weren't just reading about someone. We were actually able to play a part in it and make decisions based on this. And then, of course, with that came, oh wow, we can be so much more than just sticking our thumb on page 3, making a decision, and when we made the wrong one, to go back. We actually were able to make more in-depth decisions with these dice rolls and make our own characters. So that's how it evolved. So I've always been a big proponent for never scuff off someone's access into the game if they didn't just open a red box and starting playing D&D, that's the only way to get into the game. I kind of give a chuckle and say, no, there's many different paths that will eventually lead to what we all do and love within the hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go much further, our mutual friend Crafty Matt has a request here. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Scott, he would like you to explain to me the hellish nightmare of being stuck on the 71 right before the 91, which is where Crafty Matt currently is.
Well, crap! I didn't prepare for this. What do I do? Yeah, for those who don't know, I live in Southern California, and Matt, a friend of mine that I met a few years ago through a local game store in Corona, just lives a few minutes away, and we deal with daily Southern California traffic. And the 71, the area that we live in, the 71 is a 2 lane, well, not 2 lane, but 2 lane on each side highway. So a 4 lane highway that is supposed to shuffle hundreds of thousands of people every day from their jobs to these homes between the hours of 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And yeah, and literally, we're talking maybe 20 miles to 50 miles could take you anywhere from 15 minutes on a good day to 2 hours on a bad day. So
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
God.
that is the ninth hell of Riverside County is the 71 and 91 freeway.
Yeah. I've never been to California. I've never driven in California, but something tells me that being on the road out there would make me feel a little bit better about uh, 65, 24, and 40 here in Nashville. So, uh,
Oh, I mean, you don't have many bragging rights. I myself, when I went to go visit my brother who lives in Nashville, I spent a good 2 hours going through the heart of the city too.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
hmm
due to a horrible traffic backup. But
yeah.
yeah, so it's everywhere. It's just everywhere.
Now, was this by the heart of the city? Do you mean downtown?
Through downtown, yes, right through downtown.
Yeah. So,
Um,
unfortunately, that's not a traffic backup. That's not an isolated incident. That's just Broadway. That's Broadway every night.
oh yes, we all can relate then.
Yeah. And then
Hmm.
Crafty makes a very kind of sad point here in chat.
Right.
Apparently, Watsy put out a book today. I
Mm,
I can't tell you which one because as Crafty said here, no one cares.
yeah, I just to be perfectly honest, I saw it maybe a bit ago. The Golden Keys to the Golden Key. I know I'm Keys to the Golden Key. I can look it up if I want, but I'm not going to bother.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, there's many different reasons why before this whole OGL thing occurred, why it wouldn't interest me, but because of that and other aspects, it's just just hey, that's great. Hope if you enjoy it, great, but no interest in it whatsoever.
Mhm.
But yeah.
And then on the far end of the extremes, we have Lou from Dandelion Games, who lives in a John Mellencamp song and says if he hits two stoplights in a row, he feels like he needs a Xanax. So,
Well, I mean, yeah, it's all those pink houses for you and me. They're too calming. They'll make you pass out when you're driving. So,
yep.
um, oh, excellent.
And then, of course, obviously, hey to Matt, Crafty Matt, hey to, Luau Lou, and also
Hmm.
the Pronto here in chat. Guys,
Yes.
welcome. Glad that you could join us.
Oh.
So, moving on from that, we get to one of the more difficult questions that I ask people on this
Hmm.
show, because those of us who devote a lot of time and energy to this hobby, there's not a lot of money to be found in it. There's not a lot of fame or accolades.
Hmm.
Uh, we do this out of love for
Right.
the hobby, and that love comes from fond memories we have of gaming with our friends and loved ones. So, Scott,
Hmm.
if you had to pick a fondest RPG memory, what would that
Hmm.
be?
I, for people like myself, we tend to have a lot of fond memories of, games that we played in our youth. Those halcyon days of, gaming eight to 15 hours a day on a weekend and doing it all over again after a bit of sleep. And so there's many fond memories there that, if I try to remember them, I will. But I'm a bit older, so they tend to get a little hazy. But I'll just recall one that I remember right now. So we were probably 14 or 15, fresh in high school, and we were beginning a new campaign for Forgotten Realms. And we weren't quite in the transition from first edition to second edition yet, but I believe it was right on the horizon. And but at the time, it was a group of us. And one of the things that we recently discovered was the Dritsto Erden stories. And a friend of mine who absolutely loved the one of the antagonists in there named Artemis Entry, which is if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, I apologize, but um, who is kind of like a thief assassin. And so
Mhm.
he modeled his character after that to the point where he named his character Artemis Intrari, and we gave him nonstop crap about it. And so we would play, and he would, try to essentially mimic all the aspects of the character. And he was the the prototypical I'm a thief and this is what my character would do guy. So, and mind you, that may not fly well with adults, but with children, younger kids and whatnot, even less so, because it's like, come on, dude. But so one night we were playing a game, and I want to say that it was the Forgotten Realms introductory adventure under Ilfarn. And we were just tired of his nonsense. I mean, he was a nice guy, but we were just tired of it. And so there was an argument over some sort of treasure, and we had just acquired a new 30-sided die. Never used it before, and probably never used it for anything since we got it. But it was like, hey, this is the newness, and so we were like, all right, dude, enough. Come on. So we're like, look, here's what's going to happen. The DM was like, I'm going to roll this 30-sided die. And if a 1 comes up on the 30-sided die, your character's tongue is going to grow permanent hair, and he's never going to be able to talk crap on anyone in the group again. And we're like, yeah. And mind you, this was like midnight, so it was a weekend. We were at my friend's house, and he's like, yeah, I agree. We're like, you can't go back on it. You can't go back on it. He's like, yeah, no problem. Because I mean, what are the odds? Well, 1 in 30, but so he rolls it, and of course, a 30-sided die is going to roll and roll and roll and roll more than a regular 20-sided. And then it was like magic, just that, it's like watching your number come up on a roulette wheel, and just that 1 lands, and just we scream as loud as we can. And his dad comes rushing out, just half awake, in his underwear, like, what's going on? Did someone die? What are you guys doing? Is the house is on fire? And all I remember is, there's 5 of us, 6 of us, all shouting and saying, Artemis has a hairy tongue. Artemis has a hairy tongue. Artemis has a hairy tongue. And I'll give him credit. He kept his word. He kept his cynical mouth quiet until we were able to find a cure for his hairy tongue. Every time he would shave it, it would grow back. So I mean, there's many memories, but it's just those special moments when you're younger and you're around a group of friends, and those things just kind of just stick with you. And it's silly. I mean, it's not like, we fought this, the BBG and everything went perfectly, and it wasn't a part of the adventure itself, but it was just that special moment that would never have occurred if we weren't playing a role-playing game as a group together. And we had many other fond memories like that, but that one always sticks out in my mind, especially witnessing how my son and his friends play, because I know if it hasn't occurred already, they will have their own hairy tongue incident, I'm sure. Someday also.
It's a rite of passage to have something like that. As far as D30 shenanigans here, Crafty Matt says DCC wants you to hold its beer. I've got my Xochi dice right here, and I
nice.
mean, D30s,
D24s.
D24s. What kind of craziness do you want? I've got it right here in this.
That lone D30 was way ahead of his time, and he was just waiting for the day for Joe Goodman to put it to good use. So I'm glad we found a better use than embarrassing teenage boys for a D30.
Now, speaking of teenage boys, Crafty is actually, I've put so much of his chat up here. Might have to cut him off here. Crafty said a few minutes ago, getting down to the nitty gritty, Scott, tell everyone how Noah, your son, has changed the landscape of T&D club in high school.
Well, I mean, he didn't do it on his own. It's definitely a group effort. But so I think I'll start with just an introduction of, my son and also, the club at their school. So just my son has been playing role-playing games for, God, it's been 5 years now, just maybe a little more than that, since he was first introduced to it by a friend at my daughter's softball game, who they made characters for 5th edition.
Yeah.
And like many fathers do, if you have a particular interest, whether it be gaming or hunting or cars or whatever, when your child shows a bit of interest in that, you tend to grasp the bull by the horns and maybe overindulge it a bit too much. So it's like, oh, what is this thing? And it was like, I just made this character for this game called D&D. Have you heard of it? And then all of a sudden it was like, son, let's take a walk. um, so thus began the a bit of overindulgence into pursuing it, or into getting him into it. And thankfully he took to it, because I know a lot of times you can do that and it'll turn around and go, this was just a passing thing and I'll move on. But it grew. And so over the years, he's been, I would run games for him and his friends, which as they got older would evolve into, just his friends running games and whatnot together, which is great. And then when he went to high school, this high school that he went to actually had an active D&D club. And, it was like many things, it was based on the popularity of 5th edition.
Yep.
And him and his friends decided to join. And but come to find out that this was not just a group of kids getting together to play games. It was widely popular. It spanned all grades from freshmen to seniors. And at the time they joined, it was maybe about 50 or so students involved, which just blew my mind. That it was so popular and accepted that it was like any other club, which wasn't the case back in the day, unfortunately. I mean, at least at a high school level. And so they started getting involved with it, and come to find out as they're playing that that they weren't just running just fifth edition WotC stuff. These kids were making their own games. They were making their own adventures. They weren't leaning on, the WotC printed adventures to do that. In fact, come to find out, they never really did. The only thing that they relatively used in the beginning was just the 3 core rule books. Most of them, as far as I know, never really used D&D Beyond. They vastly preferred paper and pencil. They wanted to roll real dice. They wanted to, draw their own characters. And so kind of I started getting a bit, more interest in that, and keeping the distance, because, as a father, you'll learn that, if you show too much interest in, your child's activities, you're not cool, Dad. Right. But you try to keep a good balance in that. And so some word began to spread, and a while back, forgive me if I don't remember your name, but a very generous donation was provided by someone on Twitter. He provided a bunch of Dragon magazines. Gotcha. and donated it to the club. Excuse me. And they ate that up. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having a soda here, so little burp there. Okay. Apologize. But and so it sparked an interest in not just 5th edition, but just in all aspects of gaming. They were interested in older games. They were interested in how things ran in all aspects. They started playing other games, Call of Cthulhu, Deadlands, and the interest grew. Dungeon Crawl Classics, and so even though they were still playing 5th edition, that wasn't the primary focus, and it soon became, this wasn't just Dungeons and Dragons, wasn't an all-encompassing term for 5th edition. 5th edition was just another tool for them to create and play their adventures.
Yeah.
And with that, the further influence of WotC, became on them. And I don't know about you, but I tend to feel my philosophy on, the current iteration of Dungeons and Dragons is there's 5th edition and there's WotC. 5th edition is a tool set that people can use to play a game, and it's an excellent tool set. And you can run Dungeons and Dragons with it, and WotC uses it to create its vision of what it feels Dungeons and Dragons should be, but you're not beholden to that. It's just a suggested method. Other people either aren't aware of that or they may disagree, but that's fine.
Mhm.
So yeah, and so time went on, and they branched out even more to things like Morkborg, um, and it became the creation of their own games. They would want to take bits of Fifth Edition and bits of Morkborg and bits of other games, and they were mashing them together to make their own rule set. And it's been like that for such a long time that these these kids are just out there playing these games to experience the most that they can, and they're not settling for just they're just not settling for one version. They want to go out and you know experience these games, and some don't work and some do, but the simple fact of the matter is that this particular, and I know I don't speak for all kids, but these particular group of kids, which their current D&D club now is over 80, according to my son and his friend. I just asked them this weekend. That's at a single session, when they meet at the school, it's almost like a little mini con. There'll be some people playing Fifth Edition. There'll be people playing Mork Borg. There'll be people playing 3.5. There'll be mashup of hey, here's my new rule set, let's try this out, I'm going to see if this works. So yeah, it's encouraging to see that in these kids, because it seems like some of the generations that may be a little bit older than them were, WotC's Fifth Edition was the end all to end all. No interest in anything else, and this is all they wanted to do. And if you disparaged it, or if they felt you disparaged it, I should say, it became more of like almost a personal insult to say, why don't you play a different game? Why don't we try something different? And so yeah, it's I know I'm rambling here, so tell me if cut me off if I feel like I'm rambling too much, please.
Yeah, just we'll pause there and come back to it, because this is all good stuff that you're talking about. But I mean, first of all, I'm going to bring this back up here because it's hilarious. But Crafty again, another banger here. Son, I'm about to explain to you the birds and the bees and how they use dice.
Right.
It's that moment of, Dad, have you ever heard of D&D? Son, take a walk with me. It's very reminiscent of Bobby Hill saying, Dad, can I get a gun rack on my bike?
I've never been so proud of my life. Yes, no, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. Yeah, no, it's definitely.
There's this. It's interesting, the everything that you just described. First of all, it's completely alien from how I first encountered role-playing games. Okay. That's not at all how I got involved in role-playing.
Right.
Which we'll come back to in a second. But, secondly, it's very reminiscent of almost the story that I hear from people of your generation, of someone kind of, in the know, told your son about this game that we're all playing, D&D. And so a bunch of kids get together and they're playing with kind of the resources at hand. It makes sense that they're just using the 3 core books because, those are the 3 most important books as far as, what you need to play based on, just everything that WotC's put out over the years. 3 books isn't as much buy-in as you could possibly have for 5th edition. So, that hits a good portion of kids as far as disposable income. And then just playing with dice and pencils and paper in a school environment, without having to, bring out all the technology and stuff. It's a very simple, easy way to just, we're rolling with it. We're going in. We could set up all our laptops and start working with this application, but why bother? We just want to play the game. Let's play the game.
Yeah, no, it was a bit shocking because prior to that, most of my knowledge about, and once again we're going to go back to the whole 5th edition thing, it was always under the illusion that people who were of a certain age during the the 5th edition era, it was all, we do it all in D&D Beyond.
Mhm.
I mean, if we roll dice, it's rare because why? We've got this dice roller on this application, and if we're playing anything, we're playing these pre-written adventures that were provided to us, and then when that was done, we would just move on to the next one, move on to the next one. And again, that's not saying that there weren't people out there making their own stuff. I mean, the DM's Guild is ridiculous. There's a lot of stuff on there, but for the most part, it just was not my thing. I mean, I I was, I preferred the more kind of grassroots aspect of it, which I think, may be the wrong term, but just the aesthetics of rolling dice and writing on paper and interacting with it on that particular level. And having the physical books there to read and utilize when you're playing these games, it was how we used to do it back in the day. And so seeing this particular group of kids in this generation kind of doing that, but not at the insistence of their parents. It wasn't us going, back in our day, we used to use paper and pencil, and you're using these, all these glitchy witchy technology stuff. No, they found it on their own and discovered that they prefer it that way, which was a curiosity to me. I just, I may try to, you know, and asking a 15-year-old, so why do you prefer it this way? And the answer you get is, oh, I just do.
Yeah.
So, and then, but then that also led to opinions that grew. A couple videos I did about my son and his friend when they announced the changes that were coming with one D&D, or sixth edition, if you want to call it that, whatever the case may be. They voiced opinions about that, and they're like, we don't want things to go digital. We don't
Right.
want to be stuck behind a paywall. We don't want to be nickel and dime to death, because these group of kids, they were the generation of these loot boxes and stuff. When they
Yeah.
were getting into video games, that was what they were confronted with at all times, this pay to play aspect,
Mhm.
and pay to win, and they hate it. They
Yeah.
absolutely hate it. And then now one of their role-playing games that they enjoy is now going to do the same thing to them. And they're kind of like, well, I guess we'll stick with our fifth edition and other games, and we'll be happy with the way it is. And Watson can go do its own thing, and we don't want anything to do with him anymore.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another thing I want to point out here, and Crafty actually
Mm-hmm.
again hit the nail
Yeah.
on the head here.
Mm-hmm.
Your son and his friends were entering kind of like the beginning of where they learned to socialize, where they learned to interact with each other, right as the COVID lockdowns happened.
Right.
And so, right as that development is supposed to start and supposed to really kick into high gear, they were torn apart from each other.
Right. Right.
So do you think that has any kind of impact on, now that restrictions have been lifted, now that it's not such a scary thing to get together, regardless of how you feel about them?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're here to talk about
Right.
tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now that there's less of a barrier to getting together, do you feel like they're kind of making up for lost time and wanting to eliminate the screens and kind of get back to some kind of sense of personal connection in their gaming?
I do think that's the case. I mean, if we are able to get them back on here, on a later date, they can obviously go into more detail.
Yeah.
But I do feel that's the case, because, to be perfectly honest, when when lockdown occurred, they weren't playing online like some of us were. They didn't want to. Even to this day, if I offer them, hey, you want to play a game online, with some friends from the UK or something, they'll roll a great game for you. They'll be polite about it, and they'll be like, I don't want to sit in front of a computer. I did that for 6-7 hours a day,
Yeah.
for 2.5 years. And mind you, they're doing it at school now to a certain degree, but even though they're physically back there. But no, this is their time to get together and physically interact together. And as much as I enjoy playing online, I don't know if you do, but I know others do. There's a difference. There's
is.
definitely a difference between, and there's pluses and minuses to both. But you really can't compare the two. They're two separate entities for enjoying the game. and they just vastly prefer being around each other. And I do think you kind of nailed it on the head there, that they, because of the extended amount of time they spend apart, this is their opportunity to get caught up on
Yeah.
the social engagements that they missed out being next to each other during this whole time. And it's allowed them to, I don't want to say they're caught up, but it's allowed them to interact the way they should have been for those past couple of years outside of school.
Mm.
You know, that they, they interact differently at school, as we all did as kids, but this gave them, the opportunity to be themselves,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
and do what we all did, is we want to get away from mom and dad and go be ourselves.
Mhm.
And that's what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to take things in kind of a different direction here,
Hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about how I found the game. So,
Okay.
unlike uh, unlike how Noah found it, and unlike how you found it,
Hmm.
I specifically sought out Dungeons and Dragons
Okay.
by name.
Hmm.
I was involved in geek culture. I was buying comic books on a regular basis. I was playing video games, and I knew that that there are people who play this game called Dungeons and Dragons. I have seen examples of what this is. Just I, I think my first exposure to how a game of D&D was played was, and everyone laugh at me all you want for this, but it was an episode of The Big Bang Theory.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I first saw what D&D gameplay looks like. And
Right.
so, I knew this was something I'd be interested in, and I knew what Dungeons and Dragons was, so I sought out, I want to play D&D. What's the most recent edition? Okay, it's 5th edition. That just came
Hmm.
out last year. So let's play this 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons game
Right.
in, 2014, 2015 when I first got into it. Now, as part of kind of me getting into it, I'm a millennial. I'm a
Hmm.
late millennial, but I am firmly a millennial.
Right.
We have this constant need to like push for everything to be digital, everything to be separate. There's this weird thing with millennials not wanting to leave their houses, which is weird to me. It's something I've never understood about my generation, is just the amount of people around my age who never want to leave their home.
Hmm.
And that has pushed a lot of what D&D has been over the course of 5e's lifespan.
Right.
And
Agreed.
that's what's kind of giving us a lot of this negative uh, kind of new approach to D&D, this digital first approach to
Hmm.
role playing. Um, but what I find interesting about all of this, your son is very much not a millennial. So, this is not, we are not of the same generation. We're probably about 12 years apart in
Hmm.
age, if, maybe more.
A little
Um,
more. Yeah.
but they seem to be rejecting all of that. They seem to be rejecting all the stuff that my generation has insisted on for so long.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting to see that play out in role playing, especially uh, we've pushed for digital community, digital everything all the time. I can get everything from the comfort of my own home, and now it's interesting to see a backlash to that. So
Right.
that's what really I find so cool about all of this.
Hmm. Yeah. It's now. I, I, I mean, it's interesting to me too,
Yeah,
because that aside, they are of, I mean, they're of their own generation of video gamers. I mean, they
yeah,
do play video games. They do socialize online. I mean, they'll text each other. But there's certain aspects that they prefer to do. I mean, they will, like, for example, if my son's playing on Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, he will communicate with his friends if they're playing together. But it seems like they also prefer to physically get together, and play these games, kind of like how I used
mm,
to back in the day. There was no online gaming. There was either you hung out with your buddies and either watched them play, or you did a couch co-op game or something like that.
Yeah.
And but it seems they still prefer that physical social interaction even with their technology. They don't want to, like you said earlier, they don't want to be behind a screen and behind a camera or behind a microphone 24/7. They just it's an outlet for these things, but it's not
Mhm.
all encompassing. And so, it was interesting to see that, because you kind of feel like, at least your opinion is, it's just going to continue upward,
Yeah.
from your generation, as the next generation comes up. There may be more disengagement as technology becomes stronger, because it's like, why do I need to physically interact with someone if I can just put these goggles on and it looks like they're right there? But I don't know. There was just, and to be perfectly honest, it may have been the COVID thing. It may have been those few years of zero physical social engagement, where they just realize that we don't want to interact this way 24/7.
Mhm.
It's temporary. The technology is a temporary source for them to interact when they can't physically be around their friends. So, I mean, and I'm just philosophizing here off the cuff, but yeah, it's and not just that, but also the physical aspects of the game. I mean, they're not getting together physically with laptops in front of them, like you mentioned earlier. We want to do, they're at the they're at my printer printing out character sheets every couple days. They're
Yeah.
physically they're on their beds making characters and rolling dice, and hundreds of characters that'll never get played. And drawing maps. They've got grid paper.
Yeah.
And all these things that I kind of felt were always there, but may not be around as much anymore, because why do I want to draw on grid paper when I can go on to a Roll20 and just put a bunch of pictures together and make my map? You know,
Right.
um,
Mhm.
yeah. So, but yeah, no, it'll be interesting to hear what they may have to say regarding that. But that's my general observation, like yours. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. Um, Again, just to split up the generations here again, your generation had role-playing games, and
Hmm.
then video games became a thing and,
Yeah.
became more and more advanced. My generation had role-playing and video games. And it seems like a lot of this was, how do we make role-playing games more like these video games that we know so well?
Hmm.
And now we get to your son's generation. They
Hmm.
have, the best video games that anyone has ever had.
Right.
And role playing games have become as much like video games as they have ever been.
Hmm.
And it seems like there's this desire to go, okay, we have video games already.
Hmm.
If we want to play a video game, we'll just play a video game. This role playing thing feels different. Let's separate these two things. And I see that as only a positive development.
Yeah, and that's pretty much almost verbatim what they've said on many occasions, especially regarding certain things like the inevitability of where WotC may be going with their virtual tabletop,
Yeah.
with the aspects of they're aware of virtual AI GMs. They're essentially saying, why am I doing the heavy lifting for a video game when I can
Right.
just sit down and play a video game? If I'm going to do the heavy lifting, I want to be doing something different. So yeah, all of the shiny, glitzy, isometric maps, and all of the virtual and digital miniatures and whatnot. I'm just gonna go play a JRPG, or I'm
Yeah.
just going to play, Fallout, or I'm just gonna do something. Um, so yeah, it's they've said that. It's like, why do people like this? Just go play video game. And it's
Mhm.
funny, because if I say that, I'm a grumpy old grognard,
Right.
who feels, technology is something to be feared, even though, I probably know more about tech than a lot of them, and embrace it and enjoy it. But if I say it, but if they say it, then it's like, maybe they have a
Mhm.
point, because it's coming from a new, younger perspective, and I'm
Yep.
there, and I'm there in the background going, what? I just
Mhm.
said the same thing. Yeah.
I'm going to put these messages back up on the screen here, but I'm glad that
Good.
Lou chimed in here because Lou, for those of you who don't know, is a teacher by trade.
Oh,
Um,
great.
and so he says, as a teacher, modern kids tend to be desperate for real attention. I think in person attention is so much more rewarding than social media attention. And this continues. I feel this leads a lot of them to strive for club belonging and interpersonal interaction. Um,
Hmm.
Lou absolutely nailed it on that one. Um, I mean, you can, at the end of the day, no matter the generation, we are human beings. Human
Yeah.
beings are social animals.
Yeah.
And as much as my generation has denied that aspect of humanity, and again, I
Hmm.
know I sound like someone in like YouTube comments on a classic rock video being like, "Man, I was born in the wrong generation." But my generation has so much like pushed away from interconnectedness and the true social aspect of being a human and being involved in human community
Hmm.
to see that rubber band snap back
Yeah.
and to see a new generation realize, wait, we can't just be separate from each other. This doesn't feel good. We're depressed, we're upset,
Hmm.
we want to be together, we want to, be in fellowship with each other, sharing something that we love. um I feel like, again, we're seeing that come to fruition, and I'm glad that Lou sees that. And again, these are all positive developments. This is a real white pill when it
Yeah.
comes to not just role playing games, but human interaction in general.
I Again, I feel you've nailed it on the head. At least with these group of kids, for most of them that I know, they either don't have a social media outlet, meaning they don't engage in Facebook or Twitter or or Instagram or whatever to that degree where other people
Mhm.
do. In fact, some of them may not even have any aspect of that. They do talk on Discord, and they do talk through text message, but it's one-on-one interaction. They're not they're not randomly just seeking attention from a bunch of strangers online for that 10 seconds of endorphin rush,
Right.
and which I'm as guilty as anyone about that. I mean, it's nice, but I still know that that's not real.
Right.
And unfortunately, others may not see it that way. And again, they just don't seem to have an interest in that. Facebook is for old people. Twitter is for obnoxious people,
Mhm.
and and Instagram. I mean, I am 15. What am I going to post pictures of? My unmade bed. So, but
Mhm.
they'll go on there for to look up stuff, funny stuff, pictures and whatnot, and share it with their friends. But it's not something that they actively engage in. Their social aspect is clearly tied to each other, whether it be the tools they use or one on one. They and that's where it stops. They're not interested in those kind of things. And I'm speaking from a perspective now. Who knows
Yeah.
what may change in 10, 15 years, but now their engagement with social media within that group of kids is different than how it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And not saying that all social media has gone down the tube, but there, like you said, there's a light. There's a
Yeah.
light where social media is not real.
Mhm.
Um, it's not meant to. It's not meant to define you. It's not meant to, um, you know, give you direction of how you should handle yourself. It's just a bunch of people talking shit on each other, and they see it exactly as that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, and honestly, if we're going to have social media, I think that's the best way to interact with it, just to see it as, this is fake.
mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
honestly, that's the most, healthy way to deal with all this, because the way that my social media, or the way that my generation uses social media, it's Ender's Game. We
Yeah. Yeah.
it's more real than we could ever realize.
Right.
Now, Noxious Bones, a fellow Skull enjoyer
Hmm.
on here, says that playing an RPG around a table will forever be more memorable than playing an FPS battle royale in a full lobby. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think what that comes down to
Hmm.
is both from a GM perspective and from a player perspective, you get to see the reactions in real time of your players or your fellow players
Yeah.
as things happen.
Hmm.
To use an example from one of my own games, there was a moment in my Dark Sun game where players who were massively underleveled for something like this encountered a nightmare beast for the
Hmm.
first time.
Right.
It attacked their caravan. They were third level, and they all thought they were gonna die.
Hmm.
And then to introduce this character as this nightmare beast was coming in, this princeling, like 15-year-old boy who was essentially like the most recent incarnation of a sorcerer king, steps
Right.
out and does psychic battle with this nightmare beast and like smites it as it's about to finish them off. Their reactions at that moment made me feel like I had accomplished something, even though I had in reality entertained six people
Hmm.
for 4 hours. The feeling that you get of pulling off a moment where your players are in awe of something that's happened, or your fellow players at the table are really enjoying what's going on. That's a sense of community, it's a sense of bonding,
Hmm.
and it's a memory that will carry you through because it's one unique to just you and a handful of players. you
Hmm.
you and just a couple people really know what went on that night and really know that moment occurred.
Right.
And then because you experienced it in person firsthand, it is just all the more visceral, all the more accessible as a memory.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can obtain that to a certain degree in certain video games.
Mhm.
I feel the first person shooter of a battle royale or things like Call of Duty or Battlefield, you may touch on that briefly, but you're not going to get the same thing. I mean, you may get it in other games. But the only one I can think of off the top of my head is, games like multiplayer survival games. My
Yeah.
son and his friends were in, they were in love with Ark,
Yeah.
the the dinosaur survival game. But they weren't playing the game. They were working together to make ridiculous stuff within this game, and they were still interacting with it. They could care less about the story. They wanted to create a pit of monsters and set their friend's spawn point in there. So every time he dies, he just shows back up. And they
Mhm.
would laugh and laugh and laugh and have good
Yeah.
times, and they would continue on with that. It was still the social interaction of it all. The game was just a medium for them to do that. And I don't think and no, not disparaging battle royale. I mean, again, I play them, I enjoy it for a brief little fix, but you're not going to get that kind of sense of communal experience that you just said there, that you get with role playing games when you're there with your friends, sitting around the table and experiencing these things. They're not no again, they're not going to go back and say, Dad, remember 15 years ago during that sixth session of PUBG,
Yeah.
where I got second place. It was a fantastic. No, they're gonna talk about what you just said there,
Yeah.
or my memory, and that's what makes the role playing game an exceptional aspect for this kind of an entertainment, and a lot more than the what you get from a video game. So
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and again, not to harp too much on digital D&D because I know like a
mhm,
lot of people that's the only way that they get to play. I
right.
understand that, but
Hmm.
I feel like there's a limiting aspect to playing online, playing using VTTs. A lot of it kind of leans back into more of the visual aspect of role playing and what you can represent in front of your players. And I do feel like that limits imagination to a degree. Now, I
Mhm.
say that as a person with, as you guys can see, a bunch of miniatures behind me. I like the visual aspect of role
Yeah,
playing games,
yeah.
even in person, but there's just something special about, we have very minimal visuals, maybe a
Mhm,
map, maybe some miniatures, terrain if we're lucky. But there's something about, we're also going to use our imaginations here. We're going to, as a group, as an in-person collective, use our imaginations to create this image of what's going on in front of us.
mhm,
That's another magical aspect
mhm,
of role playing in person. And if you're able to recreate that online, God bless you. I wish
mhm.
I could do that, but there have been very few instances playing online where I felt like, man, I can really see this going on in my head and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Most of that comes from the energy of people around you.
Mhm.
And so, that's the magic of role playing games. And that's what makes role playing games a sticky hobby and not one that you just, are into for a little bit and then drop off of.
Yeah, everyone has a lot of people have their their moments on ice within the hobby, but so many stories such as my own, there's always, my son was making a character and suddenly I'm back in the game again. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, like you, I'm not going to disparage digital gaming at all. Digital gaming
Mhm.
kept me sane through lockdown. It opened up a world of friendship and opportunities with all the wonderful people that I got to know online during lockdown.
Yeah.
All of my friends in the UK, Bud from Bud RPGs Review, Pookie, Debbie, James, all these people that if it wasn't for this particular tool, I would never have met them. But with that said, when some of them came over and we got to physically meet at Gen Con, it meant so much more. And just that simple aspect solidified the friendship even more than what we were, what it was coming to online. And so and it still allows people to play, from people all over the world, but I still play locally.
Yep.
There's people here, that we could play online, but why? Let's go. We'll go to the game store and play. Come to my house. Go to your house. It's usually digital gaming here is utilized if kind of like a last minute thing. If we just
Yeah.
can't get our schedules together, rather than put it off for another month, let's at least get online and play a game for a couple hours, just to kind of get get the campaign rolling along rather than put it up. But for the most part, it's still physical.
Mhm.
Um, but um, but I was guilty as many when I started getting into the digital gaming, of being more concerned about presentation because I thought I had to. People would say, "Oh, just get into a Zoom chat and just do like you normally would." But I would get into the trap of I'm making these elaborate maps. I'm filling out all this information. I'm doing all these things for the presentation that nobody cared about because all they wanted to do was just play the game together and have these stories occur in their head. And all that prep and all that time was just not pointless, but I didn't need to do so much
Yeah.
because I felt I had to, and I, still guilty of that at times. But I've realized that probably the most fun I've had playing online has simply been a simple Zoom call with four people. We're rolling dice, on the table with paper in hand. We're not even using a map, and that's been far better than me moving little digital aspects of their avatars all over the place, being more concerned about that than the actual game itself.
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and before anyone calls me out on this, I am involved in a digital game right now, but
Yeah.
to be fair to me, that digital game is with Victor Gorchev, who is in the Netherlands, and
Yeah.
John TGG, who is in Florida.
Yeah.
So Tennessee, Florida, Netherlands, yeah, we're playing online.
I'm just, um, I was sorry. I just saw your chat, and Matt had said I'm lying. The most fun I had was blowing up a train with my character and three others on it. That was a digital game that I was running for Matt, playing Cyberpunk Red, and
Hmm.
and and again, the primary reason for running that was we all work, we all have kids, and we would just play a game, after hours,
Yep.
after the kids were down. And to be fair, I would much rather do that than drive home from Matt's house at midnight. Whereas if we were playing online, I can just get up and walk to bed. I mean, turn the camera off first because I'm in my boxers, but get up and walk to bed.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I mean, nothing wrong with digital aspect. It's
Hmm.
something that I believe has strengthened the hobby, strengthened the RPG community. It's allowed us to experience things we would never, ever, ever experience. But I don't think for a moment that that it's fair comparing the two as far as playing
Right.
in person and online.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think Noxious Bones here points out a
Hmm.
good truth about this. Um, RPGs, as the reason why RPGs didn't just die out as soon as the students at the University of Wisconsin finished playing Bronstein,
Right.
or Gary Gygax's friends all moved off in different directions. The reason RPGs still exist as a concept beyond those initial flashpoints of where they first came up is RPGs evoke something that goes it's primal. It goes all the way back to the earliest um, aspects of humanity, communal storytelling or
Hmm.
communal sharing of a game. For those of you who think storytelling is a bad word, it's the
Hmm.
same. It goes back just as far. It's the same concept. It's this idea of sharing something fleeting,
Hmm.
something that's only going to exist in this moment with other human beings. So I think that's what is going to keep RPGs alive as a concept,
Hmm.
even beyond whatever it is that WotC thinks they can do with this 1D&D
Yeah.
stuff. There's still going to be people who are playing in person with pen and paper and
Yeah.
dice, keeping the tradition alive. And that's honestly, I that's going to be what keeps gaming a thing forever and ever.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I totally agree with Noxious Bones on that. It does touch something inside of you. It allows you to not just read about, but experience things that you only read about.
Mhm.
And because I mean, there's people people have vivid memories of their games, just like it's the birth of their children. It can be just as real as anything that you witness in real life because these things happened between you all and you have this shared experience and like with you I call it stories, call it communal storytelling, call it whatever you want. I could care less. I get so tired of this. We need to put a label on something, or people denying people's definition of it. But at the end of the day, whether it's you feel it's during the game or when it's all said and done, you do have a story. You
Yeah.
do have something that you can go back on in your head, or communicate with those who experience it or to others. I mean, one of the greatest things that people do on a daily basis that I'll read online is people talking about the games they played. And it's fantastic to see, that excitement of something that literally occurred in their imagination. That's not physically real, but when they talk about it, it's like it really happened. Doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. When the giant purple dinosaur, fell on their walking, talking clam guy. Yeah, that's fantastic. That sounds like it just happened,
Yeah.
and it is what's going to keep it going, and it is what whenever everyone's tired of this nonsense that Watsy's trying to do, trying to incentivize all of this, or monetize all of it, I should say. When that falls flat, and whatever version that it rolls to with this, whenever version it rolls to next to it, the important thing to know is that's not the definition of D&D. The publishers of the game, the ones that are printing these books and reproducing the rules, yeah, it's D&D on the cover, and that's the brand that they own. But the
Mhm.
game that you're playing, the game that my son's playing, the game that I'm playing, the game that everyone else is playing, that's D&D. And I don't care if it's, original, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th edition, whatever the case may be. That's your definition, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And that's what's going to keep it going. I think the moment that everyone agrees what actual D&D should be, and everyone has a consensus, is when it dies. Because it will then just become completely uninteresting and bland. So, yeah.
Yep. Now, Lou again points out something interesting. That's also kind of an aspect about going back to the roots of role playing. He says, it's interesting how little prep is really needed for a good game, an outline and a small sketch of a map. In stripping away VTTs, maps, miniatures, just going back to pencil, paper, dice, imagination, it really outlines how low the barrier to entry is specifically for game masters. There's this idea that's been built up by 5th edition, by the kinds of players that have kind of glommed onto 5th edition, that you need to be George R.R. Martin or J.R.R. Tolkien,
right,
or someone like that to be a dungeon master, because you essentially have to write a fantasy novel and then run your players through it. That's not true at all.
Right.
All you need is just a small outline of, these are possibilities that players could run into. Here's a not even a map, here's a list of locations that you guys can go to, and here's a couple of the things that you find when you get there. That's all it takes to run a game. There doesn't have to be some kind of big grand overarching story. You don't have to have your fantasy world all built out and mapped out and know the history going back thousands of years. All you need is just a general location and a few things that players can explore while they're in there. And, maybe you open up a book and roll on a couple tables, and your epic story emerges from stacking several of those experiences on top of each other.
Yeah. And I feel, I mean, I'm as guilty as anyone else. A lot of times you get caught up in the fact that, the attention to detail, and this is a personal thing, but I do like certain details of certain aspects of the game. I personally prefer having a map just to kind of give a better general idea. I may not use exact figures, but I do like representations on the map to give everyone a better idea in certain aspects like combat or whatever. But I used to be more concerned about a lot of prep. I'm the Call of Cthulhu guy who will laminate all the handouts, and organize them in a folder to have readily available for these. And whereas someone will say, I just just do a black and white printout and just that's all you need. So the aesthetic aspects I do enjoy. I mean, I bought the darn Call of Cthulhu masks of Nyarlathotep prop set. They're wonderful. They're fantastic. They're immersive and they're great. Are they necessary? No, they're not. But with that said, I've a lot of times I tend to prefer to run certain published adventures for certain things just because it is easier. It is to a certain degree. Until one day I was running a game for my son and I was shuffling through a bunch of stuff because I had lost my place in this published adventure. And he said, why don't you just make something up on your own? It's so much easier. And I kind of sat there and at first I'm like, you little fucker, you're right. You're right. and then, and his friends kind of just, gave me this look. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm sweating the small stuff. In fact, even with a published adventure, you only need to take bits and pieces of it, and you don't need to use the whole freaking thing. And it kind of threw me for a bit of a loop, and I realized that the game is so much easier when you're not so concerned about dotting every I and crossing every T and making sure that the attention to detail is important to your players. Why? Because they're going to create their own detail. They're the ones that are there to create the detail of what you're presenting. You're the you're essentially you're the car, but they're the ones that are at the wheel. You're not steering the car or steering the boat for them. You're just you're pointing in a direction, and they're going to decide which path to go. And it just became a bit of a revelation, and things became easier to just go, you know what, you're right. I'm just gonna I'm gonna do more of my just own stuff. Not that I was capable of. I've done it many times, but when it came to running a published adventure, I would be so concerned. Am I doing it the way it's supposed to? Is it going to turn out the way it's supposed to? Because I'm not, paying attention to the details. You don't have to do that if you're just doing your own stuff. You don't have to be concerned about the details. It's just like you said, I've got an idea. I've got a bit of scratch paper with a bit of stuff on there. Let the players figure it out. Let them fill it up for you. And they'll do a fantastic job doing that. And that's kind of how, generally speaking, it should be for the most part, for most games. Not all of them, but for some of them.
Absolutely. Crafty has another kind of addition to this topic, or and this will be kind of a good point to wrap on for us.
Yep.
By the way, Crafty did make it home. He is home safe. However, his house is full of suitors, and his wife doesn't recognize him anymore. So good luck with that, Crafty. But
nice.
You have, or you and your son have this kind of successful gaming club that you interact with and are a part of. My friend Crossface and Crafty's friend Crossface has something similar going on in his community, where he's running right now 5e, but hoping to expand beyond 5e for high school kids. So how can younger generations cultivate these successful clubs, these successful groups where, as Crafty goes on to say, it's not just, we're playing the current game, we're playing 5e, or whatever the current game goes on to be, but a space where, you can explore all kinds of different RPG options and see really the breadth and depth of what this hobby has to offer.
I'll tell you one thing that worked for me. And this is something that, because it's easy for it to cultivate with my son. Because at the end of the day, he's still my son. And sometimes, you know what, you have no choice. I'm dad. We're not running 5e tonight. We're doing something different. Yeah. But what I found that with kids is certain environments, they're more open to certain things than other things. And one of those environments are birthday parties. At several of my son's birthday parties, we've had gaming events. And some of the kids know games, some of the game or no RPGs, others weren't. But that was an opportunity to introduce them to something new, because since this is Noah's birthday and Noah wants to play Dungeon Crawl Classics, it kind of it puts them in the position of like, okay, I'm going to go along for the ride because hey, it's his birthday. Not saying that's the end all to end all, but that's worked over the years. And a lot of these kids will walk away going, wow, Dungeon Crawl Classics is so different than 5e, or I really enjoyed Deadlands, or I didn't know there was this cowboy RPG. I like cowboys. I was afraid to say something to my friends because they only wanted to play, with knights and wizards. But with that, I do feel if it's in a school environment with a club, probably the best thing to do if you can is just maybe even have a small little library. Yep. Like what was going around for a while, to go back to Dungeon Crawl Classics, was a lot of the DCC fans, they would get the free quick start. They would, and get a little baggie and staple only the dice that you need for the quick start. And they would put it in these, these little lending libraries that they have in certain communities where they have these, take a book, share a book kind of thing. They would pop it in there. And then one day some kid would find it and he would discover it. So if you've got a club and you're okay with, putting some of, our precious treasures at the whim of some school kids,
Yeah.
they'll pick it up. Their natural curiosity will look at the cover of Hyperborea and go, what is this inside this thing? This is different than what's in front of the fifth edition book. And what are these monsters that's on, on the cover of Call of Cthulhu in the background of this mansion? This is different. So I think just yeah, no, man, I'm not putting Colt in the library. That's different. But yeah, I mean, just leaning on their natural curiosity, because once again, if there's still teachers in the group, or if there's parents in the group, one of the things that tends to hold true is the moment that you tend to force kids to do anything, they're going to take an about face on it. They're just not going to want to, just because it's in their nature for the most part. But if they discover it themselves, or with their friends, they're more inclined to try these things out. So, have, like, when those dungeon magazines were provided to the group, and it's just like, here's a bunch of magazines that were, about Dungeons and Dragons back in the old day. The rules are going to make, 85% sense to you. There'll be things in there you may not know about. Don't ask me about THAC0. I'm not going to describe it to you. But for the most part, Dragon magazines are about other aspects. And, it's just like when I was younger and you would see that issue of Dragon magazine with the cover, you didn't care what was inside of it, because that cover just drew you to it. And then once you open it up and you looked inside of it, then, you were just drawn right in. So yeah, I mean, it was their natural curiosity that led them to 5e, due to the popularity of it in the current climate of social media and YouTube and Critical Role and all that. Let that curiosity lead them elsewhere, because they will see the new shiny, they will see a squirrel, and they will run to it because it interests them. But it's got to be there. You're baiting the trap. You're putting you're putting old school essentials under the box with the stick, and they will eventually come and get caught. So
yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think what it'll take is people like yourself, or people like Crossface, and maybe I'm even speaking to myself a little bit here. Maybe I should find ways to get involved in this. It's going to take adults who are knowledgeable about kind of a wide variety of games and are willing to not just share these games, not just, instruct kids on how to play role-playing games, but are willing to meet the kids where they're at, engage them at their level without talking down to them, without talking at them, meet them where they are mentally, where they are intellectually, whatever it takes. Find a way to explain these games to them in a language that they understand, and show them the real fun that can be had with all of these other systems, all of these other ideas of what a role-playing game can be.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways that I feel, to begin that conversation is, if you're in a setting like that, start asking kids, what kind of, movies do you like? What kind of shows are you interested in? Hey, we're having fun with fantasy. Do you guys like, science fiction? You guys like superheroes? Does anyone here like Westerns? Start talking to them about movies, TV shows, video games. Hey, who here has played Red Dead Redemption 2? A bunch of hands shoot up. You guys want to try this Western game?
Yep.
I feel like that's a good way to, really engage what people will fantasize about. And honestly, role-playing games is all about capturing what people daydream about. The hero that they ultimately want to be, when their imagination takes them to, different lands, different places. That's the heart and soul of role-playing. And so, if you can find out what those things are, just based on, the media that they already consume, I think that's a good first step into, we're going to branch out beyond fantasy. And now, because so many of you like, playing Red Dead Redemption, we're going to, try out Boot Hill or Deadlands, or weird frontiers.
Right. Sorry, I was laughing at Dandelion Games. Yeah, yeah, you know. Do you like movies about gladiators, Bobby? Yes, that too.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, just not in that context, like the like airplane, but sure, that still holds true. But yeah, but like you said, it's also it's whatever you would do with the adults around you. I mean, like you said, don't talk down to them. Talk to them like they're real kids. I mean, what you just described right there is
Mhm.
exactly what would be recommended for getting adults into different video games.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, don't pander to the kids. You know, treat them, you know, like you would anyone else if you wanted to get them into interested into something. And you don't, you know, you don't have to go out and get, you know, McSquishy's you know, Pony Rescue RPG if you want to get your 8-year-old into role playing games.
Yeah.
You know, they may say, I want to go hunt dragons, dad or mom or whomever. Or I want to go, you know, ride horses and rob banks or chase down outlaws. You know, just and then if that occurs, you know, take a moment to make the rules a little bit easier for them or make them up. Who cares? But you know, it's as much as I enjoy 5e and I'm grateful for it for being an introduction to my son and so many other kids into the role playing world, and we'll still continue to recommend it, you know, for those who want to try it out. Again, I've got nothing against the game, um, but yeah, there's so many different ways, like you just suggested, to get people into it, that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be the knee jerk reaction of, okay, we're following a set path. You know, it could be whatever you want it to be. Just not cult, Matt.
Yeah.
Do not play cult with your children, people. No, there's nothing you can do to save that game for your children. So just save that for when they get older.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I did pick up on the airplane reference. I do appreciate that, guys. So yeah, unfortunately, I wish we could keep going, but
Mhm.
this is going to have to be it for tonight.
Not a problem.
I do want to tell everyone out there before we go,
Mhm.
this is part one. This is part
Yes.
one of the discussion. I am hoping that for part two of this
Mhm.
discussion, I will be able to actually talk with your son and one of his friends,
Yes.
schedules permitting, about their perspective on these things, because it's great to hear you talk about it, but I do want to get their perspective on things, and I want to hear it from them directly. What is it about these games that draws them in? What is it that makes them want to engage with them in these
Mhm.
ways? um, that's something that I'm really interested in, and that's something that I hope
Yeah.
we can pull off sometime next month.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're a hoot. And for those of you who want a little taste, you can obviously hop on my YouTube channel and
Yeah.
see their see their hot takes on one D&D and how they react to some of the changes within the game. Yeah, it's I mean, for lack of a better term, it's hilarious. And totally unscripted and just, you know, it's wonderful. It's just these boys and the other kids, you know, boys and girls and you know, everyone under the sun beneath, that they play with. They're all wonderful kids, and they all love these games, and they enjoy talking about it just like we do, as much as we love playing it. So
Mhm. And just one more from chat here.
mhm.
Uh, what about Troika, psychedelic nonsense? How do you pitch that to normies? Normies listen to Pink Floyd.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Troika itself, just like D&D, Troika is one part rule set and one part setting. The rule set I have played in other aspects of a game, one called Bone Steep, that isn't quite as psychedelic. So if you want to introduce people to the rule set Troika, you've got a lot of options out there. It doesn't have to be, you know, the psychedelic tunnel in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But I mean, I guess a great way to get them into it is spike their drinks, and they'll have a good time.
Mhm.
Do not spike their drinks. You know, that was a joke.
All right. Well, guys, like I said, that is going to do it for tonight's episode
Yes.
of Rolling Bones. I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation, Scott, and I
Yes.
would love to have you on again yourself, just at any point. Maybe we can get you on with Crafty at some point.
That would be fantastic. I would love that, and anything else. This was a blast. So would be happy to come on again.
Absolutely. Well, before we go out, I do. Crafty does point out something in chat. There is one more question I have to ask you.
Uh-oh.
This is the question everyone gets asked on Rollin' Bones. So the answer can be as philosophical or as sophomoric as you want it to be. But if you could put anything on a T-shirt, what would it be?
Hmm. Oh boy. I should have seen this coming because I've seen you do this before. Damn it, I wasn't prepared. Let's see here. I guess off the top of my head, I would probably have that um, picture of Lane Myers from Better Off Dead when he's in the car and he's apologizing to Bobby about blowing up his mom, but essentially it would say, I'm sorry I blew up your wizard," or something ridiculous like
Yeah.
I don't know. That yeah, there you go. That's off the top of my head.
All right.
But yeah.
Gotcha. All right, well, guys, next week I am actually going to be taking the week off. My parents are in town, so we won't be able to do Rolling Bones because I'll be spending time with them. They want to see their granddaughter. So taking a little family time next week. But the week after that, we are kicking off March with a banger.
Mhm.
I have not one, not two, not three, but four guests that are coming on Rolling Bones. They've all been on before. We've got Jason Rocky Gardner. We've
Mhm.
got Ian McGarty. Together they make the Silver Bullets.
Mhm.
We have Luau Lu, who you see here in chat from Dandelion Games.
Mhm.
And last but certainly not least, we have Jim Wampler.
Mm, excellent.
This will be Mutant March Madness, and that's how we're going to kick off the month of March here on Rollin' Bones with those four amazing guests. Ian and Rocky have a Kickstarter going on right now for Fantastic Geographic issue number 3. So we're going to be
Mm,
talking all about that, as well as North Texas RPG
yeah,
Convention and MCC and all kinds of
yeah, yeah,
crazy cool stuff that everyone's got going on. So in 2 weeks. I hope you guys will join us right here on Rollin' Bones
yeah. Mhm.
for Mutant March Madness. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you guys next time.